The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we're gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse here with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And for those of you who are not aware of the A-APRP, we were founded by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968 with our objective being Pan-Africanism. We define Pan-Africanism as the total unification and liberation of Africa under scientific socialism as defined in the 5th Pan-African Congress. And today we're talking about settler-colonialism, and we're honoring two ancestors who I'll let Evan get into.
Yeah, so the two ancestors we're honoring tonight are Modibo Keita, President of Mali from 1960-68, who was also Prime Minister of Mali Federation. And he was part of the Ghana, Guinea, Mali Union with Kwame Nkrumah, apologies. Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and himself. And we're also honoring Cecile Fatiman, a Mambo voodoo priestess during the Boaké Melon ceremony that led up to the start of the Haitian Revolution.
We always want to take the time to honor our ancestors for all of the work they've done for our liberation. Every time we do a podcast, we must do that because we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for our ancestors. So it's always nice to know the names we'll put in this video as well. So settler colonialism is what we're talking about today. Just kind of the differences. We did talk about neo-colonialism. What in your opinion is, or what actually is settler colonialism? And why should we know the necessity of what this is and how does it define the structure of society we're in?
Settler colonialism, it's the idea of like the colonialism, which is the military or takeover of a society or a nation for the purpose of extracting resources and so on. So settler colonialism involves not only the takeover of the land, but also the offloading or voluntary. This can be voluntary, involuntary offloading of people from the mother country into that land. So you have plenty of examples. So we're both in the United States. That's a pretty obvious one for settler colonialism. Canada in the north of us, pretty much most of the New World.
Most of the world, right? It's like,
and if we talk about the African continent, talking about Algeria, talking about Kenya, Zimbabwe, formerly known as Rhodesia, Tanzania, known as South Africa, right. About the Portuguese, former Portuguese colonies like Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and yeah, if you follow the news lately, country called Israel, occupied Palestine. You'll think about Kashmir, the occupied 6 counties in Ireland, Philippines, or going back. And if you hear about settler colonialism, you might think it's a solely European phenomenon, but as I mentioned, the Kashmir, the northern Cyprus, occupation by Turkey. We'll think about the Japanese Empire. They had settler and was so-called Manchuria, and also the Philippines and islands. And also further going down, Australia, New Zealand, Aotearoa.
Like the seizure, but like we talked about, or what you said about the material condition, the material resources of that land. And it kind of just goes back to having a land analysis, being aware, just kind of wherever you are, understanding just the history of that. There's actually a friend of mine told me about this app that I would recommend people getting called Native Land, which actually gives you just directly where you are, what land you're occupying. So to know that it's just not just a European thing, as you mentioned, in that it's just one of those things that happen to seizure of power, so they get these resources. And then what happens after you have the settlers in these colonies, what happens to the mindset of the culture, how it's just stratified, and just the oppression that ends up sort of like continuing because of the colonialism. And then that kind of goes into like, and it becomes neo-colonialism. Like they may not even be occupying in that land, but the control is being by a puppet. Like you might have somebody just sitting there making, you know, taking over the will of the people. So, right. Yeah.
And another aspect is this idea that the people that the culture and the people who the settlers are taking over that land, they think, they weren't using it. They're not people. They don't know what to do. Know what they're doing. It's like we're a civilized race. We can do whatever we want, and that's another aspect that is that they either, like, it obviously depends on circumstances. Like some places we talked about, Zimbabwe and Tanzania, the vast majority of the people are indigenous to the land. They have a small settler elite who are able to run, like, whoever take a large grasp of the land and then either use forced labor or some kind of, or other kind of coercive measures to make it so that they have the best use of the resources. And in other cases, it's like you have in United States, the drive was to not only take over land, but to also eliminate the indigenous populations, and to just make it seem like you hear people talk about indigenous people as if they're all gone, and it was just clearly not the case. Right. Obviously, the population went down drastically from free contact during the quote unquote age of exploration, but still they are
wiped away. Yeah, we can't disavow the freedom fighters that are still actively fighting for their land, and we do believe they will get their land back. But just kind of going on what you're saying, it's like the propaganda and just the system being aware of its last stage, and this, late stage capitalism, everything is just commodifying itself, and everything is just really sent to remind us in this country that this is our land, like this belongs, like this idea of America, United States, what we call it. It's just a place that was, you think of the history with theft and the attempted genocide and the labor. It's like all of the institutions are sort of created to reflect and to dislocate people's memory about that history. Right. We're coming up to with, 4th of July and all these other holidays that are seen to be tokens or adages to America. Like just the idea of being out with family with burgers and Coca-Cola. Like there's just so much cultural, and as we talked about, like everything is political. So we clearly see how this is done to just keep the masses disillusioned, to just be unaware of just this history and how it's continually structuring all of these forms of oppression. And it's just amazing to me because now being in this party and doing this organizing work, I'm just more, I guess, aware of the subliminal ways those messages come through media, and just kind of how the people who are even seen to be radicals, they always add in enough liberalism, enough, you don't know what it is. There's no like principle struggle that you're getting. And it just leads to the same conclusion. I think that's just why it's so important to know, what's going on, where what land you occupy. And of course, eventually develop relationships. I'm currently in occupied, at one time I was thinking it was Ojibwe land because there's a lot of Ojibwe tribes here. Right. But it's actually Wakapikut, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I am, again, like just in search of developing these relationships so that we understand just their plight and what, that's what it's all about, building solidarity with all of these various communities. So
going back, there's a project called the
I think it's the slave masters of New York or something like that, where the people note that some of the local addresses in the avenue names, the street names in New York, which is occupied, Lenape Hoking, Lenape land. That's some of the names of streets, especially in Brooklyn. They're named after prominent slave owners.
Yeah, right. Wow. I mean, that's true even here in Minneapolis. A lot of the streets are named over, these people who, and I'm not sure what the actual quote is, but it essentially is said that if you have a name, if you got a name, a street or a state named after you, that's because you likely killed a bunch of people to gain that. So, so many streets and whole towns are named after colonizers and people who own, all of this. That's a very good point, because you don't think, and that's just something you don't even really think of until you do the history and you realize, you look up who this person is. Like, why are we? There was that big conversation of the statues coming down, because all of these people don't represent. And not that that's a bad thing, even though it's emblematic. It doesn't really, taking down the statue. That's easy for the system to do because, it's just a statue. But in terms of the institution being addressed, that's where the work has to be put in.
Yeah, because the thing about it is that the statue, in order to understand the colonial history of the land and its relation, these statues are there as representations of, as you're talking about, the monopoly of the land, the monopoly of the culture, monopoly of psychology and so forth. So having all this, it even if once you think about it, once you study the history, it is a bit of a weight on you. That you think about, and it's you talk about the holidays as well. You have all this constant feedback loop of the education. The education system will educate you about, the American Revolution was fought for freedom and it was for rights and so and I'm sure that's the case for any other colonial settler colonial state where
right. That's what it's the same type of lie that's reframed, is that this was done for freedom. In the middle of me and Evan talking about settler colonialism, Jamilah joined in our Zoom. So this is a treat because this is the first time Jamilah has been a part of the Pantsula Podcast since the accident. And she's here to help us talk about settler colonialism. This was a treat and obviously a surprise. It's like, so yeah.
Yeah.
You'll add whatever, she's obviously not trying to, if she has something to say, clearly you are always welcome.
Yeah, I guess I will say that I am still recovering from the accident. It's been almost 3 months. So I am still in the rehab stage. It's going to be a while. And I'm prepping pretty soon, hopefully in a few months, to have practice prosthetic. So hopefully that works out. And then it'll be a year before I get actual prosthetic. But I don't want to be too graphic and show my legs or anything. But yeah, so in case people have not known or found out or anything, I got hit by a truck. My legs got mangled. My cousin used that word. I'm like, that's a perfect word. My legs got mangled. So I have pins and rods in the left leg, and the right leg got amputated. So that is the story in short. And if anybody does have any questions, they can ask the comrades here directly. I'm not going to be on every week, but yeah, I'm just here to support. And if I have anything to say, they've encouraged me to jump in, so I'll do that. But continue.
Okay.
I'm going to mute my mic.
Okay. So who was speaking last?
So I think I was speaking, talking about the way in which the settlers would take what they, either the people who took the land or or like something reminiscent from their mother country, and say, "Oh, yes, this is ours." The culture here, like it either gets erased or it gets relegated to some kind of spectacle, and it depending on like how like it depends on like the nature of the settlers. Like for example, like if a good book I've been reading, short book I've read lately about called by Gord Hill, 500 Years of Indigenous Resistance. They talked about sort of like the contrast between the settler-colonialism in the United States, which is quite violent.
Right, yeah, it's absorbently violent. Yeah, right.
And like all sorts of like tactics, like treaties being broken, biological warfare, like the mass genocide of people themselves, as well as the killing of food resources and such. And you have this peaceful Canada. So friendly up there. It's like genocide. I know what you're talking about. So
yeah, I saw a great conversation with the Jamu, and I neglected to remember the sister's name who we were speaking to, but she was in Canada, and they really went into like the policing in Canada. Same sort of like institution systemized. It's not like these differences. We don't really think of it as America is just grotesque, but obviously, you look at Canada and any of the other places, Australia, New Zealand, histories are just as similar in terms of just the displacement of knowledge of the people, what they do, the laws, what are created to the people. So, yeah.
I will jump in. So, I mean, the history of policing is to protect the system of enslavement, and you had slave patrols, and that is the continuation of that, protecting the system of capitalism and protecting private property and making sure the slaves don't revolt. So with the growing amount of indigenous people fighting back for land right now, not only in the Snakes, but in Canada, you are seeing a lot of pushback. But what is happening is I actually watched this documentary talking about the history and the present tense of violence towards people of Asian descent. And one of the things that was mentioned was the murder of Vincent Chin. I think that was 1982. Mm-hmm. And that brought a lot of communities of Asian descent together, and a lot of those communities didn't necessarily traditionally fight back because they were looking to assimilate into US society. And so they said, well, if I'm going to merge into the society, I can't say anything. And you have the history of AIM, you have the history of a lot of indigenous communities, and you're seeing that as well. Some communities may not have spoken up, but now with the notion of water protection, with the notion of the land back movement, this is also happening in Brazil.
All right.
So the reclamation movement. So it's interesting to see when people say, well, socialism is, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Like, we're seeing that. And it may not be in the way that traditionally you see as socialism, but it's people organizing either to get land back, to get access to resources, to get ownership of resources. And you're seeing that. And again, it may not be in the words that are spoken, but it's in the actions. And we're seeing more and more governments around the world are turning to socialism, and actual socialism, not democratic socialism. So
not the Bernie Sanders version.
Right. So to say socialism doesn't work, you're seeing it being produced to be an actual reality in the future right now. And that is what revolution is. It is ongoing. You're going to make a lot of mistakes in that. Right. To say, well, it doesn't work. Have you organized in order to make it work? What are you doing? So when going back to Vincent Chin, a lot of people, who didn't speak out, similar to the atrocities in Vietnam, the Vietnamese people said of North Vietnam, were like, we want to have self-determination. And the organization towards that self-determination was the contribution to defeating the US. So this is what we're seeing, whether it's, the, various organizations, whether they reform or revolution, people are organizing because they see there's a problem. But people are seeing that the system that is in existence, some people are looking to reform, it's like, oh, that's not working either. You keep running into the same problem. So more and more people are looking at revolution as an option. And I think that's a really good thing. And we may not see that in our lifetime, but I think our children, and whether or not we biologically have children, as a community, we have children. So our children, their children will be able to see that in the future. And I think it's a wonderful thing. And as I organize, despite, my limited physical capacity, that should never stop anyone from organizing.
Right.
And so as I see this going on, like, I literally cannot walk right now, but I'm seeing a future that I want to see because I am involved in it and I'm organizing, and I'm seeing so many people from different walks of life doing the same thing. And it does me so proud. And this is a lifelong journey, just like anything else. Just like, now I have to be able to walk again. That's going to be my lifetime journey, but also the journey towards African liberation, to see Indigenous people getting their land back around the world, in Brazil, in Palestine, in Ireland, in the Snakes. To see that and to organize towards that does my heart proud. That is my take.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's just important to always look at the people that are doing the work right now. I mean, we think that it's just done in the past, but this is work that is actively being done, and the system is doing its job to make us feel like nothing is being done. And I was just talking to somebody today who was like, oh, people are going to always vote for the Democrats. They're not going to ever get out of that mindset. And I'm like, not really. I mean, you'll be surprised. Like, I thought to some capacity, I think it's easy to think that when you're not actually aware of the work that's being done. But look, I've been in this organization for almost a year now, and it's like, I don't plan on not being in this organization because I understand that you got to do it. It's like, when you understand that process and the examples that have been made, you want to just understand what can you do to contribute further, because it's like you said, Jamilah, like, we may not see it in our lifetime, but the children that are coming afterwards, the work that we're doing right now sets the foundation for that. So
what Kwame Ture says at a speech for African Liberation Day, which is coming up, by the way, 25th of May is African Liberation Day. And what he says in a speech in DC in 1983, talking about organization, that's the real weapon. People talk about guns, knives, etc., but the actual weapon, and even the Panthers utilized this because people thought, well, yeah, I'm here to do something to the man or whatever, and they hand you a book. So any revolutionary organization understands that ideology is the weapon that's going to fuel anything you do. And what is ideology? It is a series of ideas that guide your actions.
Yes.
Like, that's the 10-second definition. And if someone's like, yeah, and they can't answer something in 10 seconds, I organize. It's just like, that's the aspect of work study in order to build that analysis so you're able to respond quickly. And so everyone has an ideology, whether or not they say everything's political. So when you are fueling that and doing that in an organized way, that is where the power is. And that is why you see government shifting right now. Going back to the other point, governments are shifting because people are organizing more and more. And the only change is going to happen from the masses, from the bottom up. And again, going back to Kwame Ture, the real weapon, the real power is in organization. So when Jesse, you're saying this is what you're going to do, it just, again, I'm going to keep saying it does my heart proud to be organizing with the both of you and the rest of our comrades in Kaji, because I can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. And our comrades who are not here on the screen right now, they can't do it alone. So the fact that we're utilizing this podcast as a means to build the party, as a means to share information, as a means to encourage, inspire people to do this organizing work. And it's not easy, but it is a means to work towards what we all want, which is liberation. And, things are too expensive. Oh, I'm not getting paid enough. And, people understand there's a problem, but people somehow are missing the solution. And that solution is the masses organizing towards our liberation.
Yes. and one thing that what Jamilah is saying is that when the settler powers is in control, it sort of like warps the time of it. Just makes it seem like it's inevitable that Europeans are going to rule in the States. They're going to rule here. They're going to rule wherever they are. That it's going to be like this forever, regardless of the organization of the masses, regardless of pollution and climate change, regardless of their own contradictions. A book that we read in our anti-patriarchy work study by Butch Lee Red Rover about the night vision talks about the desettlerization, in which as the result of imperialism taking all its resources, and some of the people who are in those colonies are going elsewhere, and they're coming in, and the settler population is like, oh, what's going on? So
right. It's almost like it's like these things connect in the ways that you wouldn't think of until you, like I was saying earlier, like you look at the television, you hear media, you hear what people are talking about, and you see in real time that these things have been institutionalized and it's aware of itself deteriorating. So newer concepts are created to sort of like bypass the awakening that's happening. And so it's like, oh, this is new, but it's like a new version of the same type of oppression. That's what usually happens.
And with the idea of fighting colonialism, you look at Ghana as an example, which is the groundwork for a lot of this work. Kwame Nkrumah was primary organizer to build the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Ghana, and still to this day, you have Jamaica, you have Ghana, you have other places which still utilize either speaking English as a primary language. The courts are based on British law. So you still
have the wigs.
Exactly.
Right. All of the theater is still in place.
Right. So you still have aspects of colonialism in Ghana, and Kwame Nkrumah contributed to building that framework to fighting that. And you have a series, so you have the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, you have Considerism, you have all of these documents written by Kwame Nkrumah, Class Struggle in Africa, all of these things which are guidelines in which we need to study in order to build that framework. And even you have the Bandung Conference, you have like all of these meetings, you have the Organization of African Unity, you have so you have organizations which have been built in this framework to fight colonialism and imperialism, but it's up to us to maintain that. And if we don't, you're still going to have these legal systems. You're still going to have languages. You're still going to have currency, which is traded, which is from the colonial system. Mm-hmm. Like all of us are speaking English. You have in Guinea-Bissau, they're speaking Portuguese. You have, they're speaking Spanish elsewhere, and Portuguese in Brazil. So it's up to us in order to maintain our languages. It's up to us to maintain those frameworks, to eliminate those systems which oppress us. And of course, the umbrella is capitalism. But there are guidelines. People are going, I don't know, how do we do that? There are literal guidelines because people have utilized those frameworks before. And yes, again, there are mistakes, but we literally have guidelines, and it's up to us to, of course, modernize those guidelines because the material conditions are a little bit different based on technology, based on, again, a shift in ideologies. Because, there wasn't necessarily a conversation around gender, that, there wasn't necessarily a conversation around all of these things that we need to have conversations around today. So it's up to us to maintain those frameworks that ancestors, comrades, elders like Kwame and Nkrumah contributed to building, Kwame Ture. So it's really, really, again, organization being that weapon to fuel what they have done. And that's the only way.
Yeah, because they certainly organized to settle the land. They organized to settle the land. They organized to they even like they even hear about some, like, we hear lately about the lone wolf terrorism that is backed up by the grand the contradiction of the settler question, that they feel like if there's any sort of drawback of any kind, even if it's like a neo-colonial aspect, like they still feel like, oh no, our place is threatened, and you either have to like do that, you get some agent coming and say, hey, we hear about, like, the blacks are going to take over the universities, they're going to implement the critical race theory and some Antifa or whatever. But yeah, there's always an issue of and then even though that gets, and then again you get that violence gets individualized, whereas any sort of resistance from the colonized set is just vilified. Like, think about how much, like, throwing a rock by Palestinians gets demonized. Think about, like, if you remember, like, during the Troubles, like, think like how much the IRA got they villainized. Think about anything like Africans do, like, against any sort of
protest, like the property being reiterated, like, obviously property over people is what the system says. Like, that means more than any form of resistance that's had.
And even the government straight up said that, like, oh, you're destroying property. To the lone wolf argument, it's really funny you mentioned that, Evan, because there's no such thing as a lone wolf. I mean, if you saw on January 6th, that was collective decision. That was months and months and years in planning. You have a whole system of capitalism which has been built for centuries in order to contribute to this system where what they now call parasocial relationships. So you have a whole group of people, for instance, a lot of these organizations that contributed to the January 6th, they are identifying so much, and going back to ideology, so identifying so much with what America represents. And we all now hopefully understand that the ideology of America is based on white supremacy and capitalism. And that is exactly what they're identifying with to preserve. So it's like, we have to preserve America. This is our America. And so they're building a weird parasocial relationship with America. And the whole saying of don't serve two masters is like, these are the same people who say they believe in God, and yet they also worship a flag. And the history of the flag is based on the exploitation, the enslavement, and the outright genocide of groups of people. And so they're also building a relationship with particular buildings, edifices, etc., and saying that is what this country means. There are particular values they worship. And when they see that being chipped away because other groups are organizing, it's like, oh, no, you can't take this country away from us, because they understand what this country was built on.
Yes.
It's up to us to understand that as well, and to fight that, and not build a parasocial relationship and say, oh, you know, the Biden administration is now diverse. Oh, they need more Asian people. Oh, what? Actually, there were Asian folks in the Trump administration, which is interesting.
Yeah, Elaine Chao.
Yeah.
Hello.
But to think, you know, identity politics is going to do the thing when, you know, Biden administration has ramped up deportation, separating children from parents. Syria was bombed.
Yep.
Self-defense. Right. And the relationship with Cuba is still the same.
Haiti.
So, right. So for us, for folks who are marginalized, who are oppressed, to build this parasocial relationship as well, and think that somehow we're in because we voted for Biden or whatever, when the policies are the same, we have to understand as well. And I think, again, going back to the point, a lot of that's being chipped away, particularly because of January 6th. A lot of us are like, ugh, I don't really have a choice, but you do. Organize for revolution.
Right.
To have a process where, you know, and so the other thing I'm seeing is a lot of people, particularly on social media, on YouTube, etc., Zoom, are having work study processes. I don't know if any of y'all have been seeing that, but more and more people are having online work study circles. And they're not necessarily part of organizations, but more and more people are studying these books and gaining an analysis, which is anti-capitalist. And that's what I mean. They may not be organizing now, but if you're reading Walter Roddy, if you're reading like Black Skin, White Mask, you're reading Pan-African analysis where they're clearly telling you to organize. So you can't just read that and have a work study session and not come out of that saying, I'm going to do this a lot. That's never going to happen. So I'm seeing that more and more. And again, like this is not going to last. This project called the U.S., the United States, is not going to last because more of us are doing this work. And as Kwame Ture has said, like, it's going to take us to, I'm paraphrasing, it's going to take us to build towards the end of capitalism. And I really do see that happening, again, with the example of more and more people having online work studies, more and more people understanding, you know, getting back to the subject at hand. It's Ramadan right now. Why is the IDF bombing a mosque? You know, it's like, like what is going on? So, you know, and I saw this other thing. It's a conversation between Israelis and Palestinians. And you had this IDF soldier straight up saying, there's this dude who, you know, the IDF killed his 10-year-old sister. And this dude, IDF dude's being like, it's not your land. And he said his generation's family coming back is Hungarian. So how is that your land?
Right.
If you're from Hungary, Israel's not your land. Yeah. So it's this delusion that, oh, you know, 1948, we were given this land, when you were gonna go to Uganda, you were gonna go to Argentina to build this land. So, you know, you can't use biblical scripture as that excuse. You know, we can go way back and talk about like the African connection, like, you know, but you can't say that this is your land when previously they were going to attempt to build on other lands. You can't say in 1917 that Balfour wrote this letter in order to partition Palestine. How is that your land if you have to take the land and not share it, and you have to write documents in order to take that land? It's clearly not your land. So getting back to settler colonialism, that is a perfect example. It's like people are minding their business, worshiping, and you just come in and say, okay, during Ramadan of all times. So we're in some interesting times, and I am very happy to see more and more people bringing in awareness to what's happening. And yes, there's definitely some liberalism going on. So again, the CIA is like, oh, I'm a single mother.
Right.
Oh, I'm this. I'm on the autism spectrum. I'm in, the diversity. And it's just like, okay, so they're pushing hard because they understand more and more people are organizing against these systems of oppression, these acronyms of oppression, CIA, FBI, whatever, A-APRP, all of these. So they're pushing harder, and they're even being in the hospital. People would watch TV like all day and all night. And I'm seeing more and more mentions of late stage capitalism. So people are like, yeah, it's late stage capitalism. I'm like, huh.
Right.
So that's a subject that's being talked about as well, because they understanding and people are organizing and pushing back against capitalism. So now they're like, okay, how can we frame this discussion, which we're still trying to get in our favor? So let's get a single mother who is of African descent, whatever. So it is, again, interesting times, but we are pushing back, and we're going to win.
That's right.
The revolutionary optimism, because you see it even in like revolutionary spaces, that there is at times you get that sort of especially here in the Snakes, it's like these people don't know this and that. It's just, but again, they are worried, so you gotta take advantage. You gotta say, hey, we want that power, we want this,
and organize enough to get it. That's, honestly, if you're, just to your point about the online work studies, if you're watching or reading, listening to Kwame Ture, that's kept just putting that in, like, organized. Like, I could not escape. It's like, well, yeah, you can't do it through individual efforts. Like, you can't do it on your own, because you have even like the criticism process where you're able to just sharpen your analysis so that you're not beholden to just the continual forms of just this anti-socialist, just uber capitalist message where we're taught that we got to do it on our own, climb this ladder, be involved, work with the system. I've seen so many more commercials and advertisements showing a diverse crew of FBI agents, and that just, emblematic performative gestures like that.
Military shows. It's like,
right. Yeah. And a lot of people think, yeah, that's it. But it's like, not if you have that, when you understand that political education necessity, it turns around.
And even going back to that point, another point of that settler colonial emphasis is how much that people who are colonized, they want, as Jamilah was talking about this as well, is like how much settlerism, it requires that constant expansion of who is considered part of the settler edifice. That and we're talking about Night Vision and another book of recently physically transitioned Albert Memmi, the Colonizer and the Colonized, all about the ways in which there's like colonialist and colonist and differences there, that some people, they want to have that they like desperately seeking to take advantage of the settler regime, and then those is like, I happen to be here. It's no big deal. Like we could get along, but it's that like that sort of liberalism, where it's just like you don't like you say, oh, if they just have more people in the police force, or oh, we get more people in civil service, or that would be cool, and
that's
or like you see like people, or you see like what I think what happened recently during the Oscar ceremony, they did a land declaration. I'm like, okay, wow. So
never heard of that.
Wait, what?
They did a land acknowledgement.
Wait, excuse me? Wait. What?
I've never heard of that.
See, this is what I'm saying. They understand how much we are organizing. And there's so many, like what's happening in Brazil right now. It's a huge movement for land reclamation. Mm-hmm. And capitalism seeing that. So, wow. Wait, how did they do it? Do you know?
I didn't see the clip, but I don't know if it's the head of the academy, like the MPA Academy or something. But they did. I swear I saw something about that. I'm like, wow. I know I'm not making this up.
Well, no, I can see. I would have to definitely look that up because that's.
So they showed clips of Dancing with Wolves.
Right.
But hey, we had Russell Means. Come on,
right? Wow. Okay. They are working hard, really hard.
They see. I mean, the activity. I mean, you mentioned the Colonizer and Colonized by Albert Memmi. And there's The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz. We're going to put
Frantz Fanon, yeah.
Frantz Fanon, yeah. We're going to put some of the sources here in the description just so that you can continue that and work and read about just all of this history here.
And so many, I'm telling you, there's so many online work study groups studying Frantz Fanon right now. I can't even tell you. And if that does not encourage you to organize, join an organization, I don't know what to tell you.
He was in one.
He was in one. Right.
He fought in the Algerian Revolution.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, people reading. This makes me so happy. I know I said I wasn't going to talk that much.
No, I'm so glad you came on. This has been really nice. You definitely lifted and brought much more meat and just substance to just this conversation. Anything more did you want to add before we wrap up? We're approaching an hour now, and I think we just gave a lot of and a surprise, of course, of just the group, but just like going back to the point that we always say, we got to organize. The system is aware. The system has been organized to just keep us misinformed, and now they see everything. Everyone's talking, so they're going out their way to just show whatever they can to just distract us by the emblematic tokenism. All of these people that may front to be on our side, but they don't have no analysis. They're not joined to any organization, and that's the way we got to do it, y'all.
And another point is about this constant talk about like expanding the settlerism is about like you're hearing a lot more and more about birth rates.
Yeah,
true.
Right.
Yes.
And if you hear about that and you think about the history of the settler states and what they've done to the people that colonized the vast sterilization efforts, you think about Fujimori and Peru and sterilization there. You think about Puerto Rico, sterilization, and like I don't know how many different programs for aid for like family planning, like which to like a Western ear sounds family planning, that's good.
Right,
they don't have to worry about AIDS, don't have to worry about sexual transmitted disease, don't have to worry about all these children, but it's like there's like a different motive to it. Like they want to make sure that they don't have to deal with as many masses and who to fight against the settler government. So if you think about one person who thought she was of the first peoples of the nation, who's talked about the birth rates in Israel and wondering about demographics and So
yeah. It's funny you were talking about aid and thinking about, rice in Haiti, but then also thinking about Cambodia, and they fought imperialist powers on bowls of rice.
Right.
So if we could do that, if they could do that, bowls of rice, like we could do that, and we have a much more privileged situation, if you will, here. And if we can't organize based on our Impossible burgers, and, all of this vegan egg, I'm vegan, so I could say that. But if we can't fight this system and organize with as much food as we have and as much waste as that happens in this country, and we can't be inspired by the comrades in Cambodia who did not have much and they fought on rice.
Right.
What are we doing? And that's what you asked me what I had to say. That's
I like that. I mean, come on, bowls of rice. We got all these other alternative meat proteins and just
we talk about. We've mentioned how a lot of our movements from the revolutionary intelligentsia, like think about all that ramen you're eating. You get if you can't have energy in one bowl, you get another bowl, and then boom, we're ready.
There it is. That's right.
Well, I think those were excellent last points. Evan, Jamilah, thank you. As we always say, organize, organize, organize. That's the only way we can do it. We're going to put the links in the description so that you can do some reading continually. And yeah, next podcast, we're going to be with another episode, encouraging you like this one to organize for revolution, do what you can, smash patriarchy, smash homophobia, smash transphobia, all these isms that are bad for society, capitalism, and let's continue to do the work.
And let's honor ALD African Liberation Day. Don't forget.
This month is the 25th.
25th.
Yep, we got 2 days, 23rd and 25th. There's LDs on the continent. There should be LDs in the snakes. Should be LDs. I think there's even there's going to be ALD in Germany.
Yep.
That's one holiday we do acknowledge and celebrate.
Yeah, and the website is africanliberationday.net, so you can get the schedule and everything.
Absolutely. We look forward to seeing you. Forward ever. Back
forward.
Forward.